Imagine a world with no tractors, no chemical fertilizers, no weather apps to warn you about that storm rolling in. Just you, a rickety wooden plow, and a field that's about as forgiving as a tax collector. Yet, medieval farmers didn't just scrape by, they fed entire villages, grew more food than their ancestors, and did it with less sweat than you'd think. How? They mastered the art of working smarter, not harder, with tricks so clever they'd make modern farmers jealous. Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll be blown away by their genius, and you might even steal a hack for your own garden. Let's dive into the muddy, brilliant world of medieval farming. Life in the Middle Ages was no fairy tale. Farmers toiled from dawn to dusk, wrestling with heavy clay soils, dodging unpredictable weather, and fending off pests that saw their crops as an all-you-can-eat buffet. But here's the wild part. By the 1300s, these farmers were churning out bigger harvests than ever, using tools that look like they belong in a history museum. No TikTok tutorials, no Amazon deliveries, just raw ingenuity. Today, we're unpacking their top 6 game-changing methods, plus a bonus trick that'll make you rethink everything you know about farming. And trust me, you'll be itching to comment your thoughts on this one. Method 1. Crop rotation. First up, crop rotation, the medieval life hack that's still a banger today. Think of your field like a picky eater who gets cranky if you serve the same meal every day. Plant the same crop year after year, and the soil gets tired, weak, and full of pests. Medieval farmers cracked this code long before scientists had fancy terms like nitrogen depletion. They split their land into 2 or 3 fields, like divvying up a pizza for different toppings. One field grew wheat or rye, medieval comfort carbs for bread. Another grew beans or peas, which are like soil superheroes, pumping nitrogen back into the ground. The third? It got a sabbatical, left empty to rest and recharge. Why was this so brilliant? Wheat and rye are nitrogen hogs, sucking it out of the soil like a vacuum. Beans and peas put nitrogen back, acting like a natural fertilizer. The fallow field let the soil recover, keeping weeds and pests at bay. It's like telling your field, go take a nap, you look exhausted. The payoff? Yield soared by 20 to 30% by the 1300s, and farmers spent less time battling sick soil. In England, they called it the 3-field system, in France and Germany, the 2-field system. Either way, it was a game changer. Crop rotation even reduced famine risks by diversifying harvests. If wheat failed, beans might still pull through. Ever tried rotating crops in your garden? Drop a comment and share your results. Method 2. The Moldboard Plow Revolution. Next, let's talk about the Moldboard Plow, the medieval farmer's MVP. Before this beast, farmers were stuck with wooden plows that were about as useful as a butter knife on a frozen steak. Those old plows barely scratched the heavy, clay-rich soils of northern Europe, think trying to dig a trench with a stick. But around the 900s, the Moldboard plow swaggered onto the scene and flipped farming on its head. This plow had 3 killer parts: a vertical coulter knife to slice the soil, a horizontal plowshare blade to cut underneath, and the real star, a curved moldboard that flipped the soil over like a pro chef tossing a pancake. Flipping the soil buried weeds and old plants, letting them rot and feed the next crop, while bringing fresh nutrients to the surface. It was like hitting reset on your field every season. And here's the kicker, it needed only 2 to 4 oxen to pull, compared to the 6 or 8 for older plows. That's a 50% cut in animal power, freeing up land to grow food for people instead of oxen. Studies show moldboard plows slashed field prep time in half, saving farmers hundreds of hours a year. But they weren't cheap. A good plow cost months of income, so villages pooled resources to buy one, sharing it like a community lawnmower. This teamwork sparked tighter-knit communities and bigger harvests. By 1200, Northern Europe's population was booming, all thanks to a better way to dig dirt. Blacksmiths who crafted these plows were village rock stars, their skills in high demand. What's the most game-changing tool you've ever used, in gardening or otherwise? Hit the comments and let me know. Method 3. The Open Field System. Now, let's dive into the open field system, where medieval farmers showed that teamwork really does make the dream work. Forget fenced-off farms like we see today. Villages carved their land into huge open fields, and each family got narrow strips scattered across them. Sounds like a logistical nightmare, right? Like trying to manage a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces keep moving. But this setup was pure brilliance. Here's the genius: scattering strips ensured every family got a fair mix of good and not so good land. No one was stuck with the muddy patch by the creek. Plus, it forced everyone to farm in sync. Your strip was right next to your neighbors, so you had to plow, plant, and harvest together. Medieval peer pressure at its finest. Imagine the village gossip: "Oh, you're not planting yet? Everyone else started yesterday." This coordination turned farming into a community sport. Plowing was a group effort because most farmers didn't own enough oxen alone. Records from medieval England show 75% of farmers had one ox or none, so they pooled animals and tools. Harvests were like village festivals. Everyone worked their strips and helped neighbors. They even shared grain stores, lending to families hit by bad harvests with a pay-it-back-next-year vibe. This shared risk system made villages bulletproof, surviving floods, droughts, and even pest swarms. It wasn't just about farming, it built trust and traditions, like harvest feasts that doubled as village parties. Imagine if we shared resources like that today. What would that look like in your community? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Method for natural pest control. Pests were every farmer's worst enemy, and medieval farmers had no chemical sprays to save the day. So how did they keep bugs from turning their fields into a buffet? They unleashed nature's avengers: chickens, ducks, and some seriously clever planting tricks. Picture a flock of chickens strutting through a field like they're on a mission. Before planting or after harvest, farmers let them loose to gobble up insects, larvae, and weed seeds. A single chicken can devour 700 bugs a day. A flock of 10? That's 7,000 pests wiped out, no exterminator needed. Ducks were slug and snail specialists, waddling through wet fields to clear them out. Geese? They were weed-eating machines, chomping young weeds while leaving crops alone. Farmers also planted garlic, onions, and leeks around fields, creating a smelly force field that repelled pests with sulfur compounds. Monastery records show monks used this trick to protect their gardens, planting rows of onions like a fortress wall. They even grew marigolds, lavender, and other flowers to attract ladybugs and predatory wasps, nature's hitmen, who hunted aphids and caterpillars for free. Crop rotation doubled as pest control, confusing bugs by switching fields yearly. A beetle that loves beans can't survive in a wheat field. For stored grain, farmers mixed in hearth ashes to suffocate weevils without harming the grain. These tricks kept pest losses to 15 to 20% of crops, not much worse than modern farms with all our tech. It's wild to think they figured this out through trial and error, no YouTube tutorials required. Got a pest problem in your garden? Try the chicken trick and let me know how it goes in the comments. Method 5. Weed control. Weeds were the medieval farmer's archenemy, choking crops and stealing nutrients like uninvited guests at a feast. Without herbicides, how did they keep fields from turning into weed jungles? They got seriously creative. First, they planted crops super close together, crowding out weeds by blocking sunlight. It's like packing a music festival so tight no one else can squeeze in. They also used short-handled hose called handmatics to skim the soil and cut weed seedlings before they grew tough roots. Timing was critical, hitting weeds 3 to 4 weeks after planting saved 2/3 of the weeding time. For grain fields, they wielded weeding hooks, sharp blades on long handles that let farmers slice weeds without bending over. A skilled farmer with a weeding hook was 10 times faster than hand pulling. These hooks were so valuable, they popped up in wills as family heirlooms, like passing down a prized heirloom sword. Farmers also plowed right after harvest to bury weed seeds too deep to sprout, and used stale seedbed techniques, preparing fields, waiting for weeds to sprout, then hoeing them before planting crops. In vegetable gardens, they spread straw, leaves, or even wool waste between plants to smother weeds. Villages held weeding days, where everyone teamed up to clear fields in a single day, turning a week-long chore into a community event. Studies estimate these methods cut weed pressure by 60 to 70%. Not bad for folks with no Roundup. Medieval farmers' backs were probably stronger than a bodybuilder's from all that weeding, but their tricks saved time and crops. Ever fought a weed war in your yard? Share your best tip in the comments. Method 6. Irrigation and water management. Now, let's talk about how medieval farmers tamed water, because too much or too little could spell disaster. Northern Europe's wet, heavy soils were a blessing and a curse. Floods could drown crops, while dry spells could starve them. Medieval farmers didn't have modern irrigation systems, but they had brainpower. They dug networks of ditches to drain excess water from fields during rainy seasons, channeling it away like medieval plumbing. In flood-prone areas, they built raised fields, piling soil into elevated platforms surrounded by drainage ditches, keeping crops high and dry. In drier regions, some communities created water meadows, ingenious systems that diverted streams to flood fields in a controlled way during dry spells, soaking the soil without drowning crops. These meadows also encouraged early grass growth for livestock, giving farmers a head start on grazing season. Farmers became masters of observation, reading river flows and rainfall patterns to time their planting and drainage. Records from England show water meadows boosted hay yields by 50% in some areas, ensuring animals and people had enough to eat. This water management wasn't just about survival, it was about squeezing every drop of potential from the land. Villages often worked together to maintain ditches and meadows, reinforcing that community spirit. It's incredible how they turned nature's challenges into opportunities with nothing but shovels and know-how. Have you ever dealt with too much or too little water in your garden? Drop your story in the comments. Method 7. Manure Management. Let's talk about manure, medieval farmers' not-so-secret weapon for supercharging their fields. Without synthetic fertilizers, they turned animal poop into gold. Cows, sheep, pigs, and even chickens produced heaps of manure, which farmers collected like it was treasure. They'd pile it in heaps to compost, letting it break down into a nutrient-rich mix that was like a smoothie for the soil. Spread across fields before planting, it boosted crop growth like nothing else, adding nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium naturally. Farmers got strategic, too. They'd graze animals on fallow fields, letting them drop manure directly where it was needed, no wheelbarrow required. Records from medieval England show this could increase yields by up to 25% on treated fields. Villages often had shared manure pits, with everyone contributing and taking their share, like a community compost club. It wasn't glamorous, but it was genius, turning waste into wealth. Ever tried composting at home? Drop your best tip in the comments. Method 8. Intercropping. Next up, intercropping, medieval farmers' way of making every inch of land work overtime. Instead of planting one crop in neat rows, they mixed different plants in the same field, like throwing a party where everyone brings something to the table. For example, they'd grow wheat alongside beans, or oats with peas. The taller grains gave climbing beans support, while beans fixed nitrogen to feed the grains. It was like crops high-fiving each other to grow better. This multitasking had big perks. It maximized space, reduced pest problems, and kept weeds in check by crowding them out. If one crop failed, the other might still pull through, spreading the risk. Monastery gardens often used intercropping, with records showing 10 to 15% higher yields than single-crop fields. It's like medieval farmers invented the ultimate side hustle for their fields. Got a small garden? Tried mixing crops? Share your experience in the comments. Method 9. Seed selection, breeding the best. Medieval farmers were also master seed selectors, acting like plant matchmakers to grow stronger crops. They didn't have labs, but they had sharp eyes. Each harvest, they'd save seeds from the healthiest, most productive plants, those that survived pests, drought, or floods. Over generations, this selective breeding created hardier, higher-yielding varieties tailored to their local soils and climate. Think of it as medieval genetic engineering, no test tubes needed. Records from manor rolls show farmers traded these prized seeds with neighboring villages, spreading the best genetics like viral memes. This practice could boost yields by 5 to 10% per decade as crops got tougher. It took patience, but it paid off big time. Ever saved seeds from your best plants? Tell me how it went in the comments. Method 10. Hedge and fence systems. Finally, let's talk about hedge and fence systems, medieval farmers' way of keeping their crops safe from wandering animals and nosy neighbors. Instead of modern wire fences, they planted dense hedgerows of thorny bushes like hawthorn or blackthorn around fields. These living fences were livestock-proof, wind-blocking, and even provided berries or firewood. Some hedges doubled as pest control, attracting birds that ate crop-munching bugs. In open field systems, temporary wattle fences, woven from flexible branches, kept animals out during growing season. These barriers were cheap, reusable, and surprisingly tough. Village records show hedgerows reduced crop losses from animals by up to 80%, while also marking land boundaries. It was like medieval farmers built Fort Knox for their fields. Have you used natural barriers in your garden? Drop your ideas in the comments. Here's the bonus trick that tied it all together: livestock management. Medieval farmers didn't just grow crops, they raised animals that were the backbone of their system. Oxen pulled plows, sheep provided wool, and cows gave milk, but managing them was an art form. Farmers used common pastures for grazing, shared by the village, to avoid overgrazing. They rotated animals across fields, letting manure fertilize the soil naturally, a free nutrient boost. After harvest, they let pigs roam fields to eat leftover grain and root up weeds, turning waste into food and prepping the soil for next season. They also bred animals selectively, choosing the strongest oxen and most productive cows, improving herds over generations. Records show some villages tracked animal lineages like royal family trees. This careful management meant fewer animals did more work, freeing up land for crops. It's like medieval farmers were running a farm startup with zero budget and infinite hustle. What's the smartest way you've seen animals used on a farm? Share it in the comments. Growing food was only half the battle, keeping it edible was just as crucial. Without fridges or freezers, medieval farmers got crafty. Root veggies like turnips, carrots, and beets went into underground pits called clamps, lined with straw and covered with soil. These earth fridges kept roots edible for 6 months, from October to March. Grain was stored in raised granaries on stone pillars to keep rats out, staying good for 2 to 3 years, crucial insurance against bad harvests. Meat and fish were salted or smoked, lasting months or even years. Salt was so valuable, it inspired the word salary. People were literally worth their salt. Milk became cheese, waxed and aged in cool cellars. Fermented veggies like sauerkraut provided winter vitamins. These methods were so effective, a good harvest could feed a village for years. It's mind-blowing how they nailed preservation with no tech, just knowledge passed down through generations. Ever tried old-school food preservation? Share your experience in the comments. Why should we care about medieval farming? These folks were sustainability pioneers. Crop rotation, teamwork, natural pest control, and clever storage weren't just about survival, they were about thriving with minimal resources. Today, as we grapple with climate change and overworked soils, their low-tech solutions are inspiring modern farmers to rethink industrial methods. Plus, their community-first mindset reminds us we're stronger together, whether it's sharing tools or ideas. If this dive into medieval farming blew your mind, smash that like button and share this video with anyone who loves history, gardening, or just a good story. Which medieval hack was your favorite? Crop rotation, moldboard plows, or maybe those pest-eating chickens? Drop it in the comments, I'm reading every single one. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next video on how ancient people outsmarted their toughest challenges. And here's a challenge for you: what modern problem could we solve with medieval ingenuity? Comment below, and let's keep this conversation growing.